Ready? Can I share my screen?
Go ahead, Road.
One moment. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen now.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry for that. Good day, everyone. I'm Roaldo Perla, as mentioned by Ms. Carrie, a Senior Economic Development Specialist from the Agriculture, Natural Resources, and Environment staff of NEDA. And today I'll be sharing with you some of NEDA's processes related to ensuring climate change strategies and priorities are integrated in national planning, investment programming, and then the budget. So my presentation will focus on the following. First is the overview of planning, programming, and budgeting process. Second is setting of priorities, strategies, and goals for the medium term through the PDP and the results matrices. And last is the investment programming as input to the budget prioritization. So this illustration provides an overview of the process framework for planning, programming, and budgeting, which actually begins with the formulation of the PDP and its accompanying results matrices. You can see in the leftmost part of the screen. So this is when we identify the priorities, the strategies, and performance indicators and targets that will be monitored over the planning period. So I would like to note also that while NEDA takes the lead in the preparation of the PDP, it is actually the whole of government and society that contribute the most to its formulation. So from the identification of priorities and targets, as you can see in the middle, contained in the targets contained in the PDP and the RM, the different agencies and offices of government now prepare and submit their respective priority programs and projects or PAPs to NEDA for inclusion in the Public Investment Program or the PIP. So PIP submissions from agencies and offices are then consolidated and subjected to the validation of the NEDA Secretariat. The validation process usually focuses on determining the compliance of submission with the criteria set by NEDA for inclusion of PAPs in the PAP. Examples of this are responsiveness to the PDP, implementation readiness of the PAPs, and consistency or accuracy of entries. So upon review and validation, the NEDA Secretariat then submits the results of its validation for confirmation of the respective planning committees and subcommittees before it is consolidated, approved, and then submitted to DBM and Congress as reference in the budget preparation and prioritization. Now, during the budget preparation, the link between the annual budget and plan is established by ensuring that PAPs to be allocated with resources or submitted for inclusion in the National Expenditure Program or NEP, then eventually funded by under the General Appropriations Act or GAA, are responsive to the plan and should therefore be included in the Public Investment Program, PIP. Now, I'd like to note before I proceed that the PAPs included in the PIP are accorded priority in the review of annual budget proposal of line agencies and are expected to be provided with annual allocation. Moving on to the planning cycle, maybe some of you are already familiar, but the Philippine Development Plan is actually first of the 4 medium-term plans to be anchored on the Ambition Natin 2040, which articulates the Filipino people's collective vision of a matatag, maginhawa, at panatag na buhay para sa lahat. So in view of the COVID-19 pandemic that we experienced this past 2 years, the PDP overall framework was actually updated with the overall goal now of achieving a healthy and resilient Philippines by 2022. The PDP is focused on translating the country's ambition, the President's 0 to 10 point socioeconomic agenda, and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development into concrete strategies, policies, programs, and activities that respond to the emerging trends and challenges under the new normal. So the plan also recognizes building safety and resilience as among its foundational strategies towards sustainable development. You can see the pink row below this framework. So the PDP ensures that priority strategies are laid down to enhance the resilience of all sectors of society, particularly the poor and the vulnerable. So while strategies on environmental protection, climate change, and DRR cut across different chapters of the PDP, the major strategies are identified in this chapter, the environment chapter, chapter 20. So also in view of the 19 pandemic, the chapter's strategic framework was also readjusted to focus on the improvement of ecological integrity and socioeconomic resilience of resource-dependent communities. So the updated sector outcome now takes into consideration the socioeconomic condition of resource-dependent communities in the context of climate change and disasters, as well as the compounded risks brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. For instance, under biodiversity and ecosystem services sustained in the first column, we emphasize the need for more innovative and strengthened enforcement and monitoring of wildlife, habitat integrity, and intensified protection, conservation, and rehabilitation of natural resources. This is to prevent further spread of zoonotic diseases, the diseases that can be transmitted from non-human animal hosts to humans, like COVID. So under improving environmental quality naman, in the middle, we emphasize strategies to accelerate the implementation of innovative pollution and waste abatement measures in view of the increasing waste generation and pollution from COVID-19 response measures. Also, to ensure resilience of communities and livelihood, strategies are focused on providing sustainable livelihood and economic opportunities, strengthening capacities to undertake climate change DRM actions in the context of new normal. This is taking into consideration the multidimensional risks from public health emergencies and natural hazard events under a changing climate. Also, as part of our cross-cutting strategies at the bottom, I would like to highlight the need to accelerate also the implementation of sustainable consumption and production in the country. So priority actions on SCP are actually embodied in the Philippine Action Plan for Sustainable Consumption and Production, or what we call PAP for SCP. This was formulated by NEDA. So strategies here are geared towards internalizing and integrating the social and environmental impacts of economic activities in the market system, with the end view of having more Filipinos consume and produce green goods and services, and shift towards sustainable and climate smart practices and lifestyles. So as I mentioned, specific climate change and DRR strategies are very well integrated in the various thematic chapters and pillars of the PDP, as you can see in the slide. So example of this is for chapter 5. This highlights the need to boost the capacities of LGUs as first responders and frontline service delivery units and strengthen their competencies for innovation, anticipatory planning, risk management, and emergency response. Chapter 6, on the other hand, underscores the importance of developing business continuity plans to ensure continuous administration of justice in times of emergencies. For chapter 7 also highlights the need to integrate resilience measures in the design and use of cultural assets, while chapter 8 highlights the use of modern climate and disaster resilient technologies and support tools, decision support tools, methodologies to improve resilience, productivity, and income of farmers and our fisher folks. Chapter 9 highlights the need to integrate sustainable consumption and production processes to upgrade industry operations, And Chapter 8 underscores the importance of continuing curricular reforms and topics related to climate change and disaster preparedness. Chapter 11 and 12 so highlight the need to ensure disaster resilient infrastructures and mainstream public health goals, especially in local plans. And Chapter 14 pushes for the intensified rollout of available technologies that can be used for pandemic, state of calamities, and other emergencies. Chapter 15 also fosters growth of green and sustainable finance markets. And Chapter 18 targets to strengthen the coordination and harmonization of protection and rehabilitation initiatives for women and girls in various emergencies. And lastly, Chapter 19 promotes integration of disaster resilience, climate change measures in infrastructure, enhanced adoption of renewable energy, alternative fuels, advanced energy technologies, improved energy efficiency, water supply and sanitation, and enhanced supply chain network system. In addition to this, PDP also espouses a national spatial strategy that provides basis for policies on urban development, infrastructure development, environmental resource protection and conservation, and disaster mitigation. So the NSS recognizes comparative advantages of cities and municipalities and seeks to address spatial and socioeconomic inequalities by linking lagging regions with leading ones rather than advocating the uniform dispersal of development can create which can create diseconomies and inefficiencies. The NSS also recognizes the potential of metropolitan centers, regional centers, as well as sub-regional centers to contribute to resilience building and climate change mitigation. Now let's move on to the investment programming cycle. Earlier, I mentioned to you the PIP. So the PIP or Public Investment Program actually is a 6-year programming document accompanying the PDP. So the PIP, like the PDP, is also anchored on the President's 0 to 10 point socioeconomic agenda, the Vision Natin 2040, and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. So the PIP is a rolling list of priority programs and projects to be implemented by the government, including GOCCs, of course, and other national government offices and instrumentalities. So the priority POPs included in the PIP should be responsive to the strategies and indicators identified in the PDP and the results and its results matrices, which means that the PIP is continuously updated annually, in fact, to accommodate development changes in the government's priorities. So the PIP also serves as a guide in the programming and budgeting of PAPs and eventually in the monitoring and evaluation of plan targets. Simply put, the PIP serves to operationalize the different strategies espoused in the PDP in view of achieving the targets and outcomes set in the PDP's results matrices. So what sets the PIP, this PIP, actually PIP 2017 to 2022, apart from its predecessors, is that it was created through a new system. It's what we call a people or PIP online system, which is an online database of government's priority programs and projects. So this is what it looks like, the people system. So it was only put up during this planning period, in view of streamlining the process of preparing the PIP and strengthening the link between planning, programming, budgeting, and monitoring to ensure budget efficacy. So specifically, what this does is to allow online submission by agencies yourselves of information on your priority PAPs, including project details and status updates. So it also facilitates us, the NEDA Secretariat, in reviewing and validating your submissions and assisting us in the report generation. So in the succeeding slides, I will show you examples of modules that the Secretariat use in validating your submissions in the PIP. So here are just some of examples. So this module is what we use in tagging PI PUPs, tagging PUPs in the PIP in terms of their contribution to the SDGs. So as an example, this is a simple process actually of ticking yung SDG targets that that the programs and projects contribute to. So for example here is the SDG 13, take urgent action to climate change and its impacts. It's a very simple process of tagging. So we look at the description of the projects, its expected outputs and outcomes, then you compare it with the SDG indicators and targets. So same process we follow with the PDP. As I mentioned earlier, one of the requirements actually for inclusion in the PIP is the responsiveness to the PDP outcomes and targets. So we also check contribution of the PAPs that you submit to the different chapter outputs and different PDP outcomes and outputs. So an example here is, for instance, when projects contributes to resilience of communities and their livelihood increase, so we just tick that box. Then there's a corresponding, under that outcome, there's also multiple aggregate outputs and specific outputs, and we also check that if the projects contribute to those. So I think this ends my presentation. Thank you very much for listening, and good day to everyone.